The moment my hearing came back, the very first thing I wanted to do was gloat, specifically to Lachlan Doyle, my longtime nemesis, my sworn rival. What I didn't expect was to walk in on him staring at a Polaroid of me, his voice low and unguarded, filled with something that sounded a lot like longing. "Wifey, when are you finally going to fall for me?" So I made a split-second decision. I stayed silent. I let him believe I was still deaf. I watched his performance unfold. His hands moved sharply, signing with irritation, "Why are you here again?" But out loud, his voice told a completely different story, soft, almost plaintive. "Oh. You're finally here." Lachlan and I had been at each other's throats since childhood. And for the past 3 years, ever since the car accident that took my hearing, he'd hovered around me relentlessly. Sometimes he showed up just to provoke me. Other times, he picked fights using sign language. Yes. He actually learned American Sign Language just to argue with me. That morning, Lachlan had gone to his office at Doyle Holdings early. When I arrived, the receptionist didn't even try to stop me. She knew the routine. Me barging into his office to start a fight had become a weekly ritual. The front desk staff smiled and nodded as I passed. I nodded back and headed toward the private elevator. Then I heard whispers behind me. Actual whispers. "The boss's lady is here again." I shipped them so hard. Mr. Doyle's going to be smiling all day. I froze and turned around, confused. The receptionist noticed and immediately pretended to work. The boss's lady? Were they talking about Lachlan? Did that mean he had a girlfriend? Before I could process that thought, the elevator chimed. Top floor. I pushed open the heavy oak doors to Lachlan's office. He was alone, sitting on the leather sofa, staring intently at something in his hand. Completely absorbed. I hadn't even taken a full step inside when I heard him sigh, a deep, unguarded sound. "Wifey, when are you finally going to fall for me?" I crept closer, curiosity burning. I peeked over his shoulder. The photo in his hand looked painfully familiar. It was me. An old Polaroid, edges worn white. Judging by my baby face, it had been taken years ago, probably without me noticing. Lachlan sensed me immediately. He jumped, slammed the photo face down on the table, and scowled. His hands flew into sharp, aggressive signs. "Why are you here again? You don't make any sound when you walk." His brows were furrowed, like my presence physically bothered him. But for the first time in 3 years, I noticed something else. A flicker in his eyes. Bare. Unfiltered. Affection. Lachlan Doyle liked me. A mischievous thought bloomed instantly. I decided then and there not to tell him my hearing was back, not yet. I wanted to see how far this went. His hand signed, "Get out." "I'm busy." But his mouth murmured softly, almost fondly, "You're finally here. I missed you." My hearing loss had happened after adulthood. The doctor had said recovery was possible, so I never learned to read lips. I'd always assumed Lachlan was muttering insults under his breath while signing at me. Turns out, I was very wrong. I signed back calmly and reached for the photo. "Why are you stealing my picture?" I grabbed the Polaroid. Lachlan panicked and lunged forward. "Hey, give that back. It's mine." He snatched it away and shoved it into his suit pocket, while his hand signed something entirely different. "I keep it to motivate myself against my enemy." I heard him mutter quietly, "The photo is mine. And so is the person." Realizing what he just thought, he flushed bright red, all the way to his ears. He looked almost shy. It was nearly noon. I signed casually, "I'm hungry." Mr. Doyle wouldn't mind buying me lunch, would he? He rolled his eyes dramatically and signed back, "Did the great Lyra Lawson go bankrupt? Begging for food now?" If I hadn't heard him whisper, "I'd love to," in the most pitiful tone imaginable, I might have believed him. I pretended to leave. Right on cue, he grabbed his jacket and chased after me, catching my sleeve. "I can afford one meal. Let's go." I slipped my sleeve free. He froze, looking genuinely wounded. I sighed inwardly. "I forgot my contacts," I signed. "Everything's blurry. Hold on to me." I grabbed his sleeve instead. It took him a full moment to process it. Then he bit his lip, trying, and failing, to hide his grin. "You're hopeless," he signed. As we walked out, employees smiled and nodded at us. I heard every whisper. Good afternoon, Mrs. Doyle. The boss's lady. I kept my face blank. This had Lachlan written all over it. I chose the most expensive restaurant in the city, the Skyline Lounge. He never said no to me. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked half the city. The hostess smiled brightly. Celebrating something? Complimentary champagne for power couples today. Before I could react, Lachlan said smoothly, yes. And my partner prefers quiet. A private booth. After she left, I signed innocently. What did she say? He signed back without missing a beat. She said I'm too handsome, so we get free drinks. Shameless. We had just received our drinks when a voice I hated cut in. Lyra? Is that you? I didn't turn around. A woman tapped my shoulder aggressively. Oh right. I forgot, you're deaf now. Brittany Lawson. My stepsister. I ignored her, but she wasn't done. She's broken, Brittany said loudly to the man with her. You think she can compete with me for the inheritance? I almost laughed. She had no idea how wrong she was. Before I could react, Lachlan accidentally knocked over his hot coffee, splashing Brittany's hand and dress. My bad, he drawled calmly. He stood, blocking her path. Apologize. She can't hear you. Then learn sign language. After an awkward, humiliating attempt, Brittany signed an apology and fled. I signed to Lachlan, thank you. Don't mention it, he replied. I hate seeing trash pollute the air. As I ate, I heard him mutter, I don't want to thank you. I want a kiss. I choked on my drink. He rushed to help, looking genuinely worried. I signed frantically, I'm fine. He looked confused. Pretending to be deaf around Lachlan was dangerous. He glanced at the business proposal in my bag and signed sharply, this project is a scam. But out loud, he said softly, my wifey shouldn't waste her time. I'll invest $50 million. Just look at me. $50 million. I stared at him. He frowned. Why are you staring? Planning something evil? I signed slowly, Lachlan. You're handsome. He froze. His face turned red, hands flying in denial. But his mouth whispered, I want to kiss her so badly. I leaned back slightly. Sometimes I genuinely worried about Lachlan's sanity. And yet, if he really had split personalities, I hoped the $50 million offer applied to both. The thing about Lachlan Doyle was that he made even a simple lunch feel like a hostile takeover. One minute he was signing at me like I'd personally ruined his life, sharp wrists, impatient fingers, dramatic eye rolls, and the next he was leaning forward like a man with a secret too heavy to carry, murmuring things that would have made any sane woman run. My wifey shouldn't waste her time. I'll invest $50 million. Just look at me, okay? Please. I kept my face calm. I kept my hands steady. I kept playing the role I'd worn for 3 years like a second skin. Deaf Lyra didn't react to whispered confessions. Deaf Lyra didn't blush when a terrifying CEO said the word please like it hurt. Deaf Lyra didn't nearly combust when he said wifey again, softer this time, like he was tasting it. So I did the only thing that made sense. I signed, very slowly, so he would have to watch every word. $50 million. For what? Lachlan's eyes flicked to my hands. His mouth pulled into a mocking smirk. His hands replied with pure arrogance, for your silence. For you to stop chasing garbage projects. For you to stop getting yourself trapped. And under his breath, so quiet it was practically a prayer, he added, for you to stay where I can see you. I stared at him. He stared back. Then his hands snapped into motion again, like he needed the performance to survive the truth leaking out of him. Don't misunderstand. This is business. I'm not doing you favors. Right, he said out loud, deadpan. I'm not doing you favors. And then, because the universe had a cruel sense of humor, the hostess returned at that exact moment with our complimentary champagne and smiled brightly at us like we were the most in-love couple in the city. To new beginnings, she said. Lachlan didn't even blink. He lifted his glass. To my partner, he said. Partner. The word hit me weirdly, too intimate for someone who supposedly hated me, too possessive for a man who'd spent the last decade pretending I was an inconvenience. I raised my glass anyway, just to see what he'd do. He held mine a fraction longer than necessary when the glasses touched. And under his breath, he whispered, to you. I almost forgot to breathe. Brittany's interruption had ruined the mood, but not my appetite. I ate like a woman who'd just discovered her lifelong enemy had been secretly obsessed with her and was now offering her enough money to buy a small country. Lachlan barely ate. He watched. He watched me lift my fork. He watched me sip my water. He watched my hands sign. He watched my face like he was memorizing it, like he'd been starving and didn't know until now what hunger really was. Every so often he would sign something insulting, just to keep his brand consistent. Are you done? You're eating like you haven't seen food before. Try not to choke again. And then he'd murmur the truth. You're cute. You're so cute I can't stand it. You did choke, though. That was scary. Don't do that again. The contradictions were exhausting. And dangerous. Because the longer I listened, the more I realized something even more unsettling than the fact that Lachlan liked me. He wasn't faking the irritation. He really did enjoy fighting me. It was just that. His version of fighting looked suspiciously like hovering. Protecting. Showing up. Refusing to leave. Like he decided a long time ago that if he couldn't have me soft, he'd have me loud. If he couldn't have me willingly, he'd have me near. When lunch finally ended, I signed, I'm leaving. Lachlan's hands moved immediately. Good. Go. Stop wasting my time. But his body betrayed him. He stood up too fast, like the idea of me walking away made something in his chest panic. And his mouth, his stupid, honest mouth, murmured, Where are you going? I'll take you. I blinked. I signed, You don't have to. His jaw tightened. His hand snapped, I do. Because you'll trip. Because you can't see without your contacts. Because you're reckless. Because I want to. He didn't say that last part out loud, but his eyes did. I made a show of hesitating, like deaf Lyra had to consider whether she wanted his help. Then I held out my hand. Not for his sleeve this time. My hand. Lachlan froze so hard it was like someone hit pause. He stared at my palm like it was a weapon. Then slowly, so carefully it almost looked reverent, he reached out and placed his hand under mine. Not gripping. Not pulling. Just there. A quiet support. His fingers were warm. His skin was rougher than I expected, like he actually worked for a living and not just for revenge. He swallowed. His hand signed, stiff and annoyed, Don't get used to this. And his voice, barely there, whispered, Get used to this. The moment we stepped into the elevator, the air changed. No staff. No hostess. No Brittany. Just us. A metal box climbing upward, trapping two enemies with too much history and not enough honesty. Lachlan leaned back against the wall like he was relaxed, like he wasn't hyper-aware of my hand still near his. His hands moved, so. 50 million. Yes or no? I signed, I want to see the terms. His brows lifted. His mouth twitched like he was impressed. Of course you do, he said, voice dry. Then he murmured, God, you're hot when you negotiate. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. I needed to stop letting him talk. I needed to stop listening. But I couldn't. Not when I'd spent 3 years in silence, in a world where everyone's pity came loud and heavy, and suddenly, I could hear again, and the first voice I'd heard clearly was my nemesis calling me wifey like it meant home. The elevator dinged. Lachlan's private floor. His office. His territory. He stepped out first, then paused, glancing back at me like he was checking I was still there. His hand signed, Don't wander. And quietly, like a confession slipped through teeth, he added, Stay close. I followed him into his office, past the oak doors, past the glass walls, past the immaculate space that screamed control and power. He walked to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. Bring in legal, he said. Then, because he couldn't help himself, he added, and coffee. Not for Brittany. I almost laughed. Almost. He hung up and turned to me, folding his arms. His hands signed, Sit. I didn't. I walked around his desk instead, slow, deliberate, like I owned the place. Like I belonged there. Like I was exactly what his staff had been whispering all morning. The boss's lady. Lachlan tracked me with his eyes, a faint flush creeping up his neck. His hands moved sharply, Stop pacing. You're making me dizzy. And his mouth whispered, so softly it shouldn't have reached me. But it did. You're making me want to do stupid things. I stopped behind his chair and leaned down, close enough that my perfume would hit him, close enough that my breath would graze his ear. I signed right next to him. Like what? Lachlan inhaled like a man drowning. He didn't turn around. His hands stayed rigid on the desk. But his ears turned bright red. His voice came out as a rough, helpless whisper. Like turning around and kissing you. I went still. For half a second, the room felt too small. Then I straightened, slowly, and stepped away like nothing had happened. Because if I didn't, I was going to do something reckless. Something honest. Something that would end my game too early. Lachlan cleared his throat and finally turned, expression back to cold CEO mode, as if he hadn't just confessed to a crime. His hand signed, "Don't get ideas." And then, because he was incapable of not sabotaging himself, he muttered, "Get ideas." Legal arrived. Papers arrived. Terms arrived. Lachlan was ruthless with everyone except me. He argued with his lawyer. He corrected a clause. He crossed out an entire section and rewrote it himself with a pen like he didn't trust anyone else not to trick me. The lawyer kept glancing between us like he was watching an accident in slow motion. I reviewed everything carefully. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't charity. It was a clean investment with a ridiculous valuation and an even more ridiculous protection clause that basically ensured no one could use this deal to trap me later. It also included an optional strategic partnership between Doyle Holdings and Lawson Enterprises. That part made my stomach tighten. Because it wasn't just about money. It was about my family. My stepmother. My father. Brittany. Their obsession with control. And my grandfather, who had spent his entire life building a company and then quietly placed it in my hands the moment I became an adult, like he'd been waiting for me to be old enough to protect it. Lawson Enterprises wasn't something I could play with. It was my inheritance. My responsibility. My war. I looked up from the papers and met Lachlan's gaze. He was watching me like he was trying not to look like he cared. I signed, "Why do you want this partnership?" Lachlan's hands didn't move right away. He paused. Then he signed, carefully, "Because you're going to need leverage. Because your family is going to try something. Because you're not safe around them." I stared. He didn't look away. His mouth whispered, rough and honest, "Because if I'm tied to you on paper, they can't touch you without touching me." That was terrifying. And strangely comforting. I signed, "They'll think you're doing this to mess with them." Lachlan's lips curled. His hand signed, "Good. Let them think that." Then he leaned forward slightly and whispered, "And if anyone asks, we can give them something better to talk about." My pulse jumped. I forced myself to keep my face blank. I signed, "We're not dating." Lachlan signed back immediately, insulted, obviously. "I have standards." Then his voice slid into something softer, almost pleading. "But I want to." My pen hovered over the signature line. I should have said no. I should have walked out. I should have remembered that Lachlan Doyle was dangerous even when he was gentle. Instead, I signed one sentence. "Fine. But I have conditions." Lachlan's eyes lit up like a man who'd just been handed a weapon. He signed, eager, "Name them." I tapped the page and signed, "No surprises. No public stunts. No calling me Mrs. Doyle in front of people who matter." Lachlan blinked. Then he signed, "Dead serious, people who matter already know." I narrowed my eyes. He leaned in just slightly, like he couldn't help it. And murmured, "But fine. No public stunts." Then, too quietly to be anything but a truth he couldn't swallow, he added, "For now." 2 hours later, I left Doyle Holdings with a signed investment agreement, a new strategic partnership pending final board review, and one glaring problem. Lachlan walked me down himself. Not because he had to. Because he wanted to. Employees watched us pass like it was a parade. I heard the whispers again. "Mrs. Doyle. They're so married. Look at him, he's literally glowing." Lachlan kept his expression cold. But his hand hovered near my back the entire time, not touching, just ready. Like he was guarding me from invisible threats. Or from himself. At the lobby, he stopped and signed, "You're going to Lawson Enterprises now?" I stiffened slightly. He noticed. His eyes sharpened. He signed more slowly, "Don't go alone." I signed, "I'm fine." Lachlan's jaw clenched. His hand snapped, "Lyra." And his voice dropped into something low and real. "Don't go alone," he repeated quietly. "Not today." I hesitated. Because I'd planned to walk straight into my family's den and smile while they tried to bite me. Because I liked doing things alone. It was safer. Cleaner. Because letting Lachlan into that world felt like opening a door I couldn't close later. But then I remembered Brittany's smug voice at lunch. Inheritance. Vegetable. Broken. They didn't know. They didn't understand. And if I had even the smallest advantage right now, I should take it. So I signed, "Fine. You can come. But you follow my lead." Lachlan's eyes flashed, satisfaction, relief, hunger, all wrapped together. His hand signed, "Always." His voice whispered, "Finally?" Lawson Enterprises was a different kind of cold. Doyle Holdings was sharp steel and glass. Lawson was old money, marble floors, quiet hallways, portraits of men who'd died thinking they were immortal. I walked in like I belonged there, because I did. Lachlan walked beside me like he owned the building too, because in a way, he did. His presence was that heavy, that undeniable. The front desk staff recognized me immediately. "Miss Lawson," the receptionist said politely, then glanced at Lachlan and looked like she forgot how to breathe. Lachlan offered a brief nod. Not a smile. A warning. The receptionist swallowed and hurried to call upstairs. I heard the whispering start again, softer here, more cautious. "Is that Doyle? Why is he with her? Are they?" I kept my expression calm. Deaf Lyra wouldn't hear any of it. But I did. And the strangest part was that it didn't make me angry. It made me steady. Like the world was shifting, aligning, turning in my favor. We reached the executive elevator. As the doors slid closed, Lachlan leaned in slightly, just enough for his cologne to hit me. His hand signed, "If they say anything to you." I signed back, "Let them." Lachlan's eyes darkened. His voice dropped into a whisper that felt like a promise. "If they hurt you, I'll ruin them." I stared at him. Because he sounded like he meant it. And because a small, traitorous part of me wanted to believe him. The elevator dinged. Top floor. War floor. When the doors opened, I stepped out first. And there, waiting in the hallway like she'd been rehearsing, stood my stepmother. Melinda Lawson. Perfect hair. Perfect suit. Perfect smile that never reached her eyes. Brittany stood beside her, hand wrapped in a bandage from the coffee burn like she wanted the world to mourn her. The moment Brittany saw me, her smile sharpened until she noticed who was behind me. Then her face cracked. Melinda's gaze locked on Lachlan. Her smile didn't falter. But her pupils tightened. "Lyra," she said sweetly. "What a surprise." I didn't bother speaking. I simply lifted my hands. Melinda's eyes flicked to them, satisfaction flashing briefly, like my silence pleased her. Then I signed something simple. "I'm here for the board documents." Melinda nodded, still smiling. "Of course," she said, a touch too loud. "We'll get everything you need." Brittany scoffed. "Oh my God, she's doing the hand thing again," she muttered, not quietly enough. Then, looking right at Lachlan, she forced a laugh. "Mr. Doyle," she said, syrupy. "I didn't realize you had time for charity work." Lachlan's hands didn't move. He didn't bother signing. He just looked at her like she was something stuck to his shoe. And then he spoke, clear, calm, deadly polite. "I'm not here for charity," he said. Brittany blinked, startled. Melinda's smile twitched, like she hadn't expected him to talk. Lachlan continued, eyes never leaving Brittany. "I'm here for my investment." Silence hit the hallway like a slap. Brittany's face strained. Melinda's smile finally faltered. Investment?" Melinda repeated, still trying to sound composed. Lachlan's gaze slid to Melinda now, and something about it made even her straighten. "Yes," he said. 50 million. Brittany's mouth fell open. "That's," she started, then swallowed hard. "That's not, she can't." Lachlan tilted his head slightly. "Can't what?" he asked, voice mild. "Sign? Think? Own things?" Brittany flushed bright red. Melinda's eyes flicked to me, sharp and calculating now, the sweetness stripped away. And for the first time in a long time, I saw it clearly. Fear. Not of me. Not yet. But of what I could become. I lifted my hands again. Slow. Precise. Take us to the conference room. Melinda held my gaze for a beat too long, then turned sharply. Of course, she said, too smooth. This way. As we walked, Brittany hurried alongside, whispering furiously to Melinda like a child who'd just realized the game was rigged. I caught pieces of it. This is impossible. She's lying. How does she even know him? Did she seduce him? Lachlan leaned slightly toward me, voice low. I heard that, he murmured. I didn't look at him. I signed, ignore her. He signed back without missing a beat, I can't. She's annoying. Then he whispered, soft enough that only I would hear. But you're perfect. My steps faltered for half a second. Melinda glanced back. I forced my pace steady again. Deaf Lyra didn't react. Deaf Lyra didn't hear her nemesis practically worshipping her under his breath. Deaf Lyra didn't feel her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Inside the conference room, the atmosphere was tense before anyone even sat down. Melinda took the seat closest to the head of the table like it belonged to her. Brittany slid into the chair beside her, clutching her bandaged hand dramatically. I took my usual seat on the opposite side, my seat, the one my grandfather had always saved for me, even when I wasn't there. Lachlan sat next to me without asking, an unspoken claim. The room filled quickly, board members, senior executives, people who used to look through me like I was an inconvenient reminder of the past. Their eyes kept flicking to Lachlan. Confused. Nervous. Curious. Melinda regained her smile and clasped her hands. Well, she began smoothly, since Mr. Doyle is here, perhaps we can discuss. I cut her off with my hands. We'll discuss the quarterly reports first. Then the partnership proposal. Then governance. In that order. The room went quiet. Several board members stared at my hands like they weren't used to me speaking with authority. Melinda's smile tightened. Lyra, she said sweetly, that's a lot for you to handle. Perhaps Brittany can. Lachlan leaned forward slightly, voice calm. She said she'll handle it, he replied. Melinda's eyes flickered. Brittany's face twisted. I slid a folder across the table, documents I'd been collecting quietly for months. Numbers. Patterns. Transfers. Subtle decisions that didn't look like theft until you lined them up and watched the story form. Melinda's smile finally slipped, just for a second. Because she recognized what was inside. And because she realized I wasn't here for documents. I was here to take my company back. Lachlan's hand moved under the table, barely brushing my knee, one small, grounding touch. His fingers tapped twice, like a secret signal. I looked at him. His hand stayed still. His face stayed cold. But his mouth whispered, just for me. Go on. So I did. I lifted my hands. And I started signing like a woman who'd been silent for too long. Like a woman who'd finally decided the world didn't get to underestimate her anymore. As I signed, I watched Melinda's posture stiffen. I watched Brittany's smugness crack. I watched board members glance at each other, uneasy. And I watched Lachlan, my nemesis, my rival, my problem, watch me like he'd been waiting his whole life to see me like this. Halfway through my presentation, Brittany couldn't take it anymore. She slammed her good hand on the table. This is ridiculous, she snapped. She can't even hear. How do we know she understands what she's doing? She could be signing nonsense. My heart kicked. Lachlan's eyes went cold. He stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. The room fell silent. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He looked directly at Brittany and said, very calmly. Then we'll do this in writing. Brittany blinked. Lachlan continued, voice smooth. Every decision. Every objection. Every vote. Written. Recorded. Transparent. Melinda's breath hitched. Because transparency was the last thing she wanted. I lifted my hands again, finishing my point. If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind. Brittany opened her mouth, then closed it again, like she just realized she'd walked into a trap she couldn't scream her way out of. Melinda forced her smile back, but it was thinner now. Of course, she said. We have nothing to hide. I met her gaze. And signed one last sentence, slow and unmistakable. Good. Then let's start with the trust documents. The room went still. Brittany's eyes widened. Melinda's fingers tightened around her pen. And for the first time, I saw it in both of them at once. They were scared. Because if the trust documents came out, if the truth came out, they weren't just going to lose the inheritance. They were going to lose everything. Under the table, Lachlan's fingers brushed my knee again, steady, supportive. And his voice, barely there, whispered like a promise into the air between us. Make them bleed. I kept my expression blank. I kept signing. I kept pretending I couldn't hear. But my pulse was roaring. Because I knew exactly what was coming next. They were going to fight back. And they were going to try, sooner or later, to prove I wasn't deaf anymore. And when they did, when they finally tested me, I didn't know what would break first. My lie. Or Lachlan Doyle's patience.